Hello everybody, and welcome to this session on interactive science teaching using Zoom. My name is Chris Meyer, and I'm a hybrid teacher coach for the TDSB. And in this presentation, I want to share with you some of the helpful tricks that can get you going on Zoom. Now, normally this is a presentation that I run with teachers as participants, but this time around it's just you and me. So, as we're waiting for people to arrive, I'm normally asking them to try out this trick that you see on our opening slide. So find the View option in the top right corner of your screen and select Side-by-Side Speaker Mode. That lets you adjust the size of the screen, the slides that I'm sharing, as well as the image that you see of me as our presenter. Now let's get started. Zoom works best when it's run from a laptop or a desktop machine, either using the Windows operating system or the Mac iOS. If it's being run off of a phone or a tablet device, it will have limited features. So especially for you as the host of the Zoom meetings, you definitely want to run it off of the laptop or desktop. Even a Chromebook often has limited features. Now, as we get started in today's presentation, I like people to turn on their chat feature. We'll be using this a fair bit today. So you can find that at the bottom of your screen, and I've highlighted it in green. Now, sometimes the chat feature, that symbol, can disappear depending on what else you have open on your screen or the size of your Zoom window. If that happens, you can look for those missing controls under the More button. You'll see those three dots and the word More that I've highlighted in yellow. So please open your chat window and then we can get started, or at least that's what the real participants would be doing. I am actually recording my screen instead of using Zoom to record this in order to allow you to see the meeting controls that Zoom does not share when you share a screen. Okay. So the goals that I have for this session is to simulate some genuine science classroom teaching, to give you a quick overview of different strategies using Zoom, and to definitely be short. This is a very quick introduction, so we're not going through step by step on how to use every feature of Zoom. You can find help with that elsewhere. Now, here are a few tips to help us get started. The first one is what I mentioned right at the beginning of using the side-by-side speaker mode. Now, as a host of these presentations, of the Zoom meetings, you won't see this control when you're sharing your screen. It's something that the participants will see. So it took me a while to find this feature. So I'm pointing that out here in the green, and you can see the yellow box, which highlights the slider that allows you to change the size of things. I really like this because when I'm in a classroom, I will project the presentation onto a screen and stand beside it so that the webcam captures both me physically moving around and the projection of the screen. But the students also have the direct sharing of the slide presentation through Zoom, just because sometimes the text can be difficult to see. But this is a handy trick that I really enjoy. Now, a couple other tricks. When you're setting up your Zoom classes, you don't have to schedule the time and date for each one. Choose the option Recurring Meeting and then select No Fixed Time. So for example, for my science webinars that I run for teachers, I just have one meeting set up and I reuse that knowing that it has all the settings that I want for this type of meeting and presentation. Here's the final tip. Use two monitors when you're sharing a screen and leading a class. The way that Zoom works is the chat, the participant, and the gallery views all clutter your shared screen. And so it can become difficult to see what you are trying to talk about and what you are trying to do with the actual presentation. So you can slide those windows off to an extended display. And that really helps to simplify your work with Zoom. All right, now it's time for an actual science lesson. So let's take a look at some grade 9 science and the static electricity unit. So here, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to what we're doing, going much faster than I would ordinarily with students, but I have a hunch you folks are a quick learning bunch. So here I'm introducing the charge diagram to our students, our way of visually representing the charges that are present in solid matter. So neutral matter has an equal number of positive and negative particles. So we have the blue pluses representing the positively charged parts, and the red minuses representing the electrons, the negatively charged parts. And we also write charge equations showing the quantities of each of these. Now, when they're put together, they form what we call a charge pair, a neutral particle or a neutral atom. So there's a quick science lesson for you. And here's how we can get the interactive components into our science learning. So here I have a charge diagram for a piece of acetate, clear plastic, and a piece of paper. They both start off neutral. Now we're going to contact them together, rub them a little bit, and then separate them. Now, here's the strategy that I use with my students. So I'll share a slide like the one that you just saw, and then I'll ask a series of questions that require short answers for those students to give. And the students will respond through the chat, using a special feature of the chat that allows only the host to see those responses. So this is what it looks like. After rubbing those sheets of paper and acetate together, we separate them, and some small pieces of matter have moved from one to the other. So now I start asking questions. Now, first, I'm going to set up my screen so that I can see the students' chat responses. Now, right now in this meeting, I only have one participant. So it's me and then my friend, who I will call Buddy. And Buddy is going to respond to our questions or my questions, and that way you'll see how it works. So for example, let's take a look at the piece of paper. So the charged particles have moved around, and now after it has been rubbed, is the paper positively charged, negatively charged, or neutral? Just write plus, minus, or 0 in the chat. Oh, and there Buddy has responded. But you notice it says from Buddy to everyone. So that means everybody in the class saw what Buddy's response was. And I'd like to change that. So there's a setting here. It's the 3 dots that appear in the chat box. And it allows you to select who the participants can chat with. So I want them to chat with the host only. So I've just made that change. Now, for example, the next question I can ask is, okay, let's take a look at the piece of paper one more time. What is the net charge on the piece of paper? Now, Buddy will take a moment to think and hopefully figures it out. And so Buddy responded +3 for the net charge. So you can see that only I am able to see that response is a direct message to me. And so I really like using these short, quick questions where students respond by typing either a single word or even a single letter or symbol. That's a great way to get a lot of students involved in our classes and to check on their understanding. I find that students usually quite enjoy doing that. Okay, so let me close our chat window and our participant window for now. And so here you can see that feature that I used, the host only feature found in the chat window. Now, sometimes, depending on how those questions go, there might be some interesting points that you want to discuss with the students. And so that's where you can use the annotation feature. So let me give you a quick look at that. So the annotation controls you can find at the top of the screen. And this is an interesting point. When you're sharing a screen, the controls appear at the top rather than at the bottom, as you're used to if you're a participant of a Zoom meeting. And so you have to remind yourself that you need to look for your controls at the top when you are sharing a screen. So let's use the annotate feature found here. And with this feature, you can draw on the screen to highlight any important ideas. And you can also use some text. So here we can do a charge equation, and you can ask students for their input through the chat. So for example, how many positively charged particles are shown in this diagram? So that's positive 12. And how many negatively charged particles are shown in this diagram? Negative 9. And the net charge, positive 3. And so there you have a quick example of how we can use the annotation features in Zoom. Now, these drawings and notations are on the Zoom screen, and they're not on the PowerPoint slide. So if I was to advance the PowerPoint slide, the annotations stay there. So you have to remember to clear those drawings once you're done. There's different settings that allow students to annotate the screen, or you can turn off that feature if you'd prefer not to have that kind of vandalism. All right, so here's the next part in our science lesson. I have a video to share with you. So let's check this out. So here I have a metal sphere, and I've moved a thread around that metal sphere. And I really like to stop our videos, often frequently, to help students digest what they have just seen. And this is a good opportunity to ask the class some questions that allows me to check on their understanding of what they've just seen. So for example, based on these observations of the behavior of the thread near the sphere, is the sphere charged or uncharged? And there you go. Buddy's responded uncharged. Buddy's on a roll today. That's great. So then we can continue with the video once we've agreed on our interpretation of that part of the observations. So here's the next part. So I'm charging a plastic rod with some rabbit's fur, and I contact it to the top of the pipe. To notice that it only touched the top of the pipe. Let's bring the thread back to the sphere and observe what happens. Here we go. Whoa. Now you can decide if you want to ask the students more questions now, or if you want to have them to have some small group discussions, which is the next part of our work together. So I want them to have a discussion using a Jamboard that I've set up. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to set up our Jamboard, and then there's a frame bar at the top that I'll show you how to use. And we're going to follow through all these steps here. So I've left the steps in the presentation like this in order to remind you if you want to go back and look at it. For now, I'll show you the process that I go through. So here are the instructions that I would give to the students. So there's a few questions that I want them to think about. What parts of the sphere did the string interact with? Because remember, we only touched the top of the sphere with the charged rod. So where are the extra electrons located? And how should we draw the charge diagram? So they're going to discuss this in groups and draw on a Jamboard. So here's the first part. Let's go to the Jamboard, and we're going to see how to set that up. So because I'm recording my screen, you're able to see this Jamboard here. And at the top of the Jamboard, there's this little box here that says 1/4. So this is slide 1 of 4 slides. And what I've done is I've made copies of the exact same slide, one for each group. Now in this particular version, you can see that some teachers from a previous workshop have vandalized this one as they've tried out the Jamboard features. And I can advance through the different slides just as the students would be able to find the appropriate one that corresponds to a particular group. Now, if I click on that frame symbol itself, I can see all the frames that I have. Right now, I have just 4. But let's say I had 6 groups in my class. I would want to duplicate that frame 2 more times. And now I have 6 in total. So I would give instructions to my students, group 1, go to frame 1, group 2, frame 2, and so on. So now that we're ready, I'm going to share this. So I'll click on the share button. Now, there's a few tricks here that you have to watch out for. So we want to make sure that everybody is able to edit this. So I should point out that when you first set up your Jamboard, you're going to get a link like this so that it's viewer only. So you have to change that to editor. And so you want anyone in the TDSB with this link can edit the Jamboard. That's the setting we want. So we're going to copy that link and call it done. So this is now ready for the students. And this is the same link that you saw in my PowerPoint presentation. So with the class, if I was teaching this class, I would have already gone through these steps that I've just shown you here. So now the students need to get this link, which I will put into the chat. So I paste that into the chat. Now everybody is able to access this link. And so the next step after the Jamboard is set up and we've given them their link is to send students into their breakout groups. So you can find the controls for the breakout groups along the bottom of your screen, or if you're in the screen sharing mode, they'll appear along the top. And sometimes if they're hidden, then you have to find them at the side using the ... more button. Okay, that can happen along the bottom of the screen as well if you're not in the screen sharing mode. So if you're ever looking for a control that you're sure is there, but you just can't find, check those ... more buttons. So what we're going to be doing is creating a series of breakout rooms. Now, for a typical science class, you might have 5, 6, 7 breakout groups, just depending on the size of each and the number of students you have. And what I do with my students is I let them choose their room. And what that means is they know that they are part of group number 1, and that's a consistent group in my classes. So they go to breakout room number 1. If you're in group 5, you go to breakout room number 5. There are ways to automate this process, but the TDSB has not set up Zoom appropriately, so the students have to make their own way into the appropriate breakout rooms. Now, if you choose to assign them automatically to the breakout rooms using that feature of Zoom, then it randomly shoots them into any particular breakout room. So that's our breakout room setup. So when you click Create, the breakout rooms are activated, and you might see a list that looks something like this. It lists all of the rooms and then the unassigned people. So depending on the version of Zoom that students have, they might be able to choose the breakout room for themselves. If not, I ask them to just put into the chat which room they should go into, and I use this assign to feature. So this Chris Meyer guy, I can assign to any one of these breakout rooms. If I need to send a message to the breakout rooms, I can use that control here, broadcast message to all. It is very crude, and for example, doesn't allow you to share links. So it's really helpful to make sure that you've shared all of your instructions with students before you send them into the breakout rooms. Now, I'll have a whole separate presentation on breakout rooms. So we're just going to look at this very briefly for today. Okay, so at this point, so I've shown you what I've been doing inside Zoom. And these are the instructions that the students would have. And now I'll do it myself. So I've set up the groups A2, A1, 2, A3, A4, B1, B2, B3, B4. And I just deleted those because of the size of my teacher group last time round. And my students would know that they're in cohort A, group 3, and they would go to a particular room. Okay, so you just select Open All Rooms. Now, Buddy, I'm going to assign him to group A1. And if I want to see what's going on in group A1, I just join that group. Yes. Okay, so it just takes a moment for Zoom to switch us over. And then we get to see what Buddy is doing in room A1. Hey there, Buddy, how's it going? And so now the students would open up. Now the students would open up their link in the browser with the Jamboard and do that work. Okay, so that work, you can take a look at your leisure just by following the link in my presentation, or just go back in the video to see what the content of that was. Now, as the teacher, you can decide when to wrap up the group work. So now I've decided, let's close all the rooms. We've done our work, and it's time to head back to the classroom. And so it gives students a little warning. And then everybody goes back to the main Zoom session. Okay, now as the teacher, you have to reset everything, unfortunately. So I started sharing my presentation once again. And here we are. We've completed our group discussion. And now that you've done that, you can share the screen with all of these slides from the Jamboard. And you might notice that, oh yeah, group 2 did a really good job of that. And ask group 2 to share with the class their thinking behind their work. And then we can wrap up our science lesson. So here we have electrons pushed to the surface. This is our conclusion based on our observations. So those added electrons get distributed, and electrons are pushed fairly evenly out across the entire metal surface. So they're not just at the top anymore. And it works kind of like this. We're adding electrons at just one place, but you can see all around the electrons are sticking out. And so those are like the extra electrons on our conductor, these marbles that are sticking out past the black circle. And so there's our mini science lesson for you. So here's one final tip. When you're using something like Zoom or any new software, practice. So make a practice meeting in Zoom, change the Zoom settings to allow co-hosts, and then start the meeting, and you can log into your own meeting using a separate TDSB device. Remove the co-host privileges from the other version of you, so that's Buddy that I have in this particular session. And then when you look at Buddy's computer, you see it from the student perspective. So you'll see fewer controls because they're not hosts, and other minor differences that can confuse the students. So it's important to see it from their point of view so you can give them the instructions they need to navigate around inside Zoom. All right. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us here. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email address is here. If you're looking for my science resources, you can find them under the first link. For this particular presentation, the Myers Zoom intro. And if you want a more detailed introduction to Zoom, so all the nuts and bolts of how to set up a meeting, all its different features, there's a 1-hour online recording that Zoom has put together. You can find that at the third link at the bottom. I've gone through it, and it's quite well done. Just skip the first 5 minutes, which is just talking about their different tiers of Zoom membership. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Please join us for the next session, which is all about breakout rooms in Zoom. Bye-bye.